This tutorial for Mackie's Master Fader app is about EQ, equalization, to keep things equal. Things meaning frequencies. We want a nice, smooth balance of frequencies. We don't want any part of our system to patronize any particular frequency more than it does any other frequency. The bass drum is not the most important instrument in a concert. It is also not ever the most important instrument in just about any event. Just as we want a nice balance between all the instruments, the drums, the bass, keys, etc., vocals, we also want each one of those instruments to sound nice and smooth. Any imperfections, regardless of the fault, is up to us to correct. If we have a vocalist that is real shrill sounding, we can fix that by correcting her EQ. We can swing over here to Tiffany. We can click on the equalizer. Looks like a clump of junk there. But what we've got is, we've got one not being used, so we can get that out of the way. We have a high-pass filter, HPF. A high-pass filter filters lows. A high-pass filter cuts lows. It passes highs, but cuts lows. A low-pass filter passes lows and cuts highs. It's extremely aggravating to me that someone many years ago decided to call a low filter a high-pass filter and a high filter a low-pass filter. Regardless, a high-pass filter, which is a filter that cuts lows, is something we almost always want to put on a vocal microphone. And I've done that here. You can see that the high-pass filter is turned on. You can turn it on or off. And then you can adjust the frequency. That's the frequency at which the filter begins to drop off frequencies or volume. We have this set to, look at the top here, it's 114 hertz. Somewhere around there, 112 hertz. So from 112 hertz on down is going to be radically reduced, almost gone. For instance, if this was a bass drum in a drum set and you put a high-pass filter on it and set it to 112 hertz, you'd have virtually no bass drum. You could hear the bass drum because there'd be mids and highs, at least hopefully, but there would be no low-end quality to it. Unlike this vocalist, we are not interested at all in frequencies that her mouth, popping P's and B's and T's, we are not interested in any of that. So the best thing we can do, put a windscreen on the mic if he or she is really bad. Or if you're outside doing a concert, get some windscreens and put them on the mics. And then set your high-pass filter to a frequency that significantly reduces the lows from that mic. It will make things sound so much nicer. That's a high-pass filter. Moving on to EQ, which is what we came here to talk about. This particular app or system has a 4-band, fully parametric EQ. Let's go over one band. A band would be a region or an area of the frequency spectrum or the sound that we hear. And we have the opportunity to use 4 different bands to boost or cut, raise or lower, any frequency we want. So let's talk about this singer. If she's hurting your ears, the magical frequency that is going to hurt everyone's ears is around 3,000 cycles. Just remember that. 3,000 cycles. Not 1,000, not 6,000. around 3,000 cycles. So this third band here, see the numbers up at the top changing? We could take this up to about 3K. We don't have to be exact, but it's around 3K. That, we just moved the frequency up to 3,000 cycles. You can see here, 2.96 kilohertz. The volume of that frequency band is adjusted by the G button down here, the gain. Lower it or raise it. Lower it, put it back. Double click, takes it back. That's the gain of that band. That's the frequency of the band. Now, if her voice is very shrill, we want to drop somewhere around 3,000 cycles. If we make this too narrow, it's only going to affect a few of the notes that she sings. And it's not really about the notes that she sings. It's the fidelity or the sound quality of her voice.
I could talk to you like this all day, and I can sing different notes and even go down low. I can still be annoying.
That's still 3K. So it doesn't really matter the notes she's singing. That's the root. The problem is she's got an area of her voice that is annoying. So we can go to 3,000 cycles. We can duck the volume a little bit, quite a bit. If you duck it, if you dial 3K in and you move it down just a little bit, it's going to fix it just a little bit. In other words, we already have a massive problem that she's killing me. Lowering 3K is not going to help. Lowering 3K a lot will really help. Now, if we have the frequency set to 3,000 cycles and we've lowered it quite a bit, when she sings, especially when she gets into a range around that 3K region, when she gets into that 3K region, the equalizer is not going to let that part of her voice be amplified near as much as the rest of the frequencies. So this bottom slider, is called Q. Some people call it Q factor, bandwidth. It's whatever you want to call it. But notice what it does when I make it real wide. We are now affecting almost her whole voice. And that would be basically like turning her volume down. That's way too wide. We're affecting way too much of the resonance of her voice, and all the S's and T's and the sibilants that makes us understand what she's saying or singing is all dropped. We don't want it that wide. We want it pretty narrow. So that would fix her. That will also take a trumpet, which can really hurt or get on your nerves. A violin, when it's amplified, can get on your nerves. Go to the equalizer, set it to 3,000 cycles, and make it a narrow bandwidth, or Q factor, and then use the gain to drop it. It's wonderful. 3,000 cycles, don't ever forget it. Then we have these other ones down here, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Notice I used band number 3 to correct this shrill voice. I could have used 4 or 2 or 1. But when I chose a band, there are 3 other bands there that I may need. And it would just be annoying to me to have used band number 1 for 3K. When you do something with an equalizer or a compressor or a gate, you should never, ever, ever go to the equalizer or gate or compressor and start messing with knobs if you don't know what you're doing. You will have better sound if you leave it alone. Using a factory preset for a vocal is not going to be better. A factory preset in here for a vocal is based on someone's opinion at Mackie who used a very specific microphone, whatever that is, probably not one like yours, And they made some settings that made that mic sound better to them. That is not going to apply to your situation. You would be much better off, regardless of where these are, turn the EQ off. Same with compression. Same with gating. That is a 4-band EQ in Master Fader. You can also use presets, as I just talked about. These are presets that I've made. Let's look at the saxophone. Let's load it. Recall the preset? Yes. Notice a pretty serious bump in low mid-range. There's the 3K dip. And, of course, no low end. A saxophone is not going to do anything for our subwoofers. So that's a saxophone setting. Let's look what else we have, just to see. Piano Steve, Rabbi, trumpet. Let's look at that. Okay. Nice sounding trumpet. Had a nice condenser mic on it. We didn't really need to do anything except roll a bunch of low end off. How much? 200 hertz on down. That trumpet is not going to reproduce notes down there. So use it like a knife. Use that high-pass filter like a knife. Shave it off. Get rid of it. We are not interested in amplifying any of that. So those are the presets. 58, SM58. 3K is pretty shrill on a 58. They have serious lacking high end, which explains the high boost starting around 6K and going up. This was a mid-range bump that was just sounded smoother without it. It wouldn't have made a whole lot of difference if I would have put it back. But that is a preset that I made for an SM58. I rarely use SM58s. A lot of people like them. I just personally don't. What I really like is this AKG 535. It's a condenser vocal mic and sounds wonderful. So anyway, these are all the presets that I've made. Let's make our own. Let's make one. Let's get rid of that and make this, let's make this, call this a 3K dip, okay? Let's make this pretty narrow. Let's go to presets. We're going to save this preset, store preset. What are we going to call it? Let's call it 3K dip. Return. Okay? Now, let's put that back. Let's go up to the presets. There it is right there. 3K, user presets, 3K dip. Yes. There it is. So you can create your own presets. You can delete them. Let's go delete that. Hit the little information button over here. We can recall it. We can rename it. We can put an image with it. Replace, delete, export, delete. Now, this isn't going to go away, but the preset's going to go away. That's your presets. Here's another nice, really nice feature. It's called Spectrum or RTA. You choose whatever you want. Here's RTA. Let me show you RTA. Okay, we're at the bass channel. We've got it turned on. And let's listen to some bass here. We're listening and watching. These are the low frequencies, 20 hertz all the way down here, all the way mid-range, 1K, 5K, because you see there's nothing way up high there. A lot of mids, and that's common with almost every sound we have. It's all about the mid-range. Yes, there are some instruments that have extreme low end, and those are important. There are instruments that have extreme high end, like a hi-hat and cymbals. Those are equally as important. So let me just show you what an equalizer sounds like with just moving one band. I'm going to turn this high-pass filter off so we can hear all the good bass. There's a lot of mid-range right there. All very important frequencies. Now we're going to get into the range where there's not a lot of stuff, but a lot of clicking and slapping. You can hear it moving up and down. There's a lot of noise up here on the strings. Buzz. Depends on if that's what you want. Depends on the music. Now we're getting down into the range of subwoofers. The frequency is 90 hertz. And there's 60 or 50. Now, if we want to really make this fatter, we would have to make it, the band, wider. So we're on the third band, and we would make the Q wider. But that is basically what a 4-band equalizer can do to a bass. Depends on what you want to do with it. If there's a certain fidelity like that you don't like, a lot of bass players today have really massive setups, cabinets, that when they turn them up and they listen to it, it sounds great to their ears. Unfortunately, their ears are on top of their on top of their what? Their ears are on their head, not on their knees, which is where the bass amp is pointing. So a lot of times they go crazy with frequencies, and many times they don't really understand what they're doing. Some do, but some don't. So I'm going to make this pretty wide, and I don't like that, so I'm going to dip that. So here again, if you're trying to find the frequency that's bothering you, and it's a sound check, you can't do this during the concert, you can boost and find the frequency that's really bugging you. And it could be that it's really loud from his rig. So once you find it, you can, if that's it, don't move that anymore. That's the frequency. Now come down here to the gain and drop it. And remember, lower it enough to make a difference. Don't go crazy. And going crazy is not all the way down. You're only talking about a half an octave here, or an octave of sound. Okay, this is spectrum, so we're able to look at frequencies from low to high, just like the real-time analyzer, RTA, with the exception that this is a color display, which is going to allow us to recognize certain frequencies that may be really loud. Notice that one there, that's a constant. Make this show brighter. See, it was hot. Bing, bing, ring, boom. So you can see where the frequencies are. Not much below 100 hertz. There's some there. He's playing up high on the neck. He's playing lots of high notes. But that's another way to see what frequencies may be a problem. I'm just making it sound like it's coming out of a 12-inch speaker. I cut it too much. See, that frequency is very important, but too much of it's not a good thing. Moving along, that's equalization. Then we have equalization on our outputs. That would be all of our stage monitors each have their own equalizer. If we click on Phil's mix, and then we look at the EQ by tapping that. Sorry, I already had it tapped. There's the equalizer setting for his monitor mix. Not an instrument, but his entire monitor speaker. We also have the ability to cut extreme low end and high end. Very similar to what you would have for a 2- or 3-way speaker system where there's an electronic crossover between each component. That's not what these are for, but in a pinch, if your crossover went belly up, you could use this for subs. Let's go to subs. There's subs. High pass filter, passes highs, cuts lows. We don't want to do that. But what we would want to do is we would want to cut all the highs, and we want to make them as drop off as radical as possible. So here's the low pass filter. And you can see it's chopping off highs radically. We could take this all the way down to, let's say, 95 hertz or 90 hertz, which is a common frequency for subwoofers. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that same setting on the bass. So let's go back to the bass channel. Do we have that option here in the left and right? Yes, we do. So here's what that would sound like. Low pass filter is on. Let's just use 6 dB per octave. And we're going to set this to 90 hertz. Okay? Now let's listen to the bass. Boy, Mud City. But you can notice how you can still hear some of the mids and highs. Not much highs, but certainly mids. Now let's listen. If we were at 24 dB per octave, that's basically what a sub would sound like. So that's approximately 90 hertz. So here, even though Mackie has not advertised that it has speaker processing in it, it does. And it does a good job. So let's get rid of that because we don't want to cut all that out of our sound. Let's go back to our main mix. Turn the bass back down some. And now I want to show you not only does the Mackie provide a 4-band parametric EQ for all of your outputs, all of your mixes, it also provides a 31-band EQ if you're familiar with the 31-band EQs. And there it is. The graphic EQ is on. Now it's off. Now it's on. So you can use this just like you used to if you used to have a 31-band equalizer. Or you could use the parametric. You swipe down like that. Or you could use both. And there's a nice feature in the settings. And we can see here the default output EQ view is set to PEQ. That's parametric EQ. Which means when we're in a mix over here, like Phil or Tiffany's or somebody, if we click their equalizer, do we get a parametric EQ or a graphic? I've chosen a parametric. The parametric equalizer is better, in my opinion, because you can very specifically dial in any frequency you want, and you can make it very narrow. You cannot do that, however, with a graphic EQ, and let me show you. If 3K was a problem, here's 3K right here. You could do something like that, and that would take care of the 3K. But unfortunately, even though that shows a very skinny portion of the sound, it's actually pretty wide. In fact, it's a third of an octave. That's why they call these 1/3 octave EQs. For every octave of sound, we have 3 volume adjustments. So even though that sounds like that would be pretty narrow, it's not anywhere near as narrow as a parametric. You can double click that. I hope you don't ever do something like this. Oh my word, you talk about something that's going to sound miserable. No matter how you do that, it's going to be pitiful. Great Scott. Don't do that. Don't use the draw. When you come here, that's presets. Store preset, reset graphic EQ. Thank you. When you come here, it's because you want to do a very specific thing. So don't fall into the trap of, well, we haven't used the equalizer. Let's open up the equalizer and mess with it and see if we can make it sound better. I guarantee you, if you don't know what you're doing, it's not going to sound better. Okay, enough badgering. Graphic EQ on or off. Let's go back here. All right, that's the equalization on EQing an instrument and EQing a monitor output, or in this case, the mains, your left and right mains EQ. Let me add something here real quick before we finish up this portion of the tutorial. If you use a high-pass filter, remember that cuts lows. You could run this up to about, 75 hertz or so, somewhere around there. If you want to be specific, let's just tap on that and type 75 point enter. Now it's exactly 75 hertz. What we've done there is the left and right mains, which feed your main speakers. What it's doing now is it's relieving your top speakers from having to reproduce sub frequencies, which they're not good at anyway. If you're like most people, you have subwoofers that are dedicated to low frequencies. Subwoofers aren't good at reproducing anything but low end. That's why they're called subwoofers, below. So it's a good idea to roll the low end off of our main top speakers. What that will do is it will allow all the power that you have in your top speakers to be utilized for powering sensible frequencies that cabinet can produce, not waste a bunch of energy and make the speaker woofer cone slap back and forth trying to do the kick drum. It's never going to do as good a job as the subwoofer. So that's kind of a good thing to do with your mains. If your speakers are powered, you probably have processing built into them. QSC speakers, Electro Voice, JBLs, they all have crossovers built into them. And hopefully on the back of them, there's a switch that will allow you to roll off the low end. If it doesn't have that, which would be surprising, but if it didn't, you could always use this high-pass filter. Passes highs, but cuts lows, and set it to around 80 hertz. And that will make your top cabinets even cleaner sounding when they reach the end of their power. Now then, what can we talk about next? I know, shows and snapshots.